of weather that is Molen Kenyana telling us, of course, what we should expect in the world of nature and weather. Well, with me is a guest I'm going to introduce later, but we are going to be focusing on achieving that is a school feeding in Uganda's schools. We all know that food is a right, a human right, not negotiable at all. But we find that in many of our schools in this country, most are under universal primary education, up to 70% of these children, and when we talk about UPE, we mean primary 1 to P7. Many of these children, about 70%, go without food while at school. Can you just imagine that? A child has to go and study, but at the end of the day, there's nothing that this child is feeding, yet they're expected to learn, which is a human right. All declarations we've ratified or penned signature, that is something that really happens. Now this morning, we want to discuss first the magnitude of the problem and how best we can find solutions to this, more so now that school is going to be reopening. And joining me on set is Julius Kapepwe, who happens to be the program director at Uganda Death Network, an organization that carried out a study or a research and established a number of facts, established the magnitude of this problem, but also the challenges that have to be addressed. Julius, you're most welcome to our studios this morning.
Thank you, Ndugu. My pleasure to be here.
Well, maybe to begin with, when we talk about Uganda Death Network, one would wonder, what is Uganda Death Network, and why did you interest yourself in such a research, maybe where one would thought it would be by the Ministry of Education and Sports or any other non-government organization that either fights for the rights or deals with children? For you, I know you in reporting the country's debt, how we manage Uganda's debt. How did we go to this extent?
Thank you. Uganda Death Network, we are a national policy advocacy organization that works towards citizens' participation in prudent management of public resources in Uganda. That means that for, say, when government is looking at prospects for revenues, for financing the country's development program, Uganda Death Network, just like other organizations, is present, and we make suggestions to government on where money could come from, reduce this tax because of this injustice, increase here, look at this window, ensure compliance, just enforce what is in existence as opposed to having new taxes. So those kinds of discussions. But also when money has finally come into the state basket, where is it being allocated? We think tourism is so important because it can generate a lot of revenue as opposed to otherwise, for instance, the runaway public expenditure on recurrent expenditures that we see. So reduce money on these elements of things, but increase here because there is potential for getting more revenues. And that citizens, when you do that, can easily get out of poverty faster than otherwise would be. So how do we come into this? For instance, in 1996, when Uganda Death Network was founded, it was precisely on the basis of advocating for debt cancellation for a country called Uganda. The name Uganda Death Network. That time the country was highly indebted, as we are nearly building towards that even again, but that's a different discussion.
Not for today.
Yes, but at that time, under what was called the Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, you can hear even the words, Highly Indebted
Poor Countries Initiative.
Poor Countries Initiative across Latin America and Africa, including Uganda. And we were successful for debt reduction, at least cancellation to that extent, up to about 1% in 1990s, and also again in the 2000s. Now, it is those debt relief resources that were used to begin certain key government programs for poverty reduction, including universal primary education. So universal primary education, as part of the human capital development configuration, is so dear to Uganda Death Network that to date we continue to find out aspects that can make it improve the performance. Therefore, the school feeding as one of the other elements. We've done many others on capitation grant, for instance, that you can't just sustain a child, a pupil at school at 3,000 shillings per term. That this should be increased. But where will the money come from? Then we come back to the discussions on. We see some opportunity for money here. Those guys who are supposed to pay and they are not paying, government, please reach out to them and clamp them down so that they don't dodge tax, and then we can increase our own revenues, reduce on the borrowing by increasing your own domestic revenues. So that's how we come into with the school feeding in this particular case.
Okay, well explained. And of course now our viewer looks at that perspective why we see Uganda Debt Network into this. Kapepo, you carried out this research. Yeah. Let's understand how serious is this problem going to be, or it has been, because you know schools are going to be reopening hopefully come January. And if nothing is done, that means there may not be any changes. So let's look at the gravity of this problem.
The situation of children going to school and keeping there without feeding for a whole day, without any meal, is rampant in Uganda. To the extent that when we take the national average, 7 children out of 10 do not have a meal at school. School in Uganda begins at 8 a.m. Others even earlier. A child is at school up to about 4 o'clock or 5 in some of the cases without anything that they have taken, except perhaps water at a nearby borehole for the schools that have a bit of clean sources of water. Otherwise, the child is hungry, and therefore angry. So is the porter at school, the workers. So are the teachers. Now, you expect that kind of child, as well as the instructor, to offer the best that would be able to build our human capacities as a country. No wonder oftentimes you'll find for some of the schools that for the last 10 years, they have never gotten even a grade 1 pupil. The challenges are so outstanding. The lack of school feeding or the limited school feeding is not the only factor. There are a couple of other factors. This time, as you highlighted when we were starting, we are looking at the issue of the lack of school feeding at school, and the conviction that from the perspective of Uganda Debt Network and such other actors like Save the Children International and many others, that we can achieve it. Actually, we can deal with that.
Statistically, let's look at the statistics.
So 7 out of 10 no food at school. You can see, and more so with the areas that tend to be the highly impoverished in this country. Karamoja taking lead, the Karamoja sub-region, the entire 7 or so districts. Acholi sub-region, another 7 or so districts. West Nile, you know, and then coming further down, including in central Uganda, including in the west of Uganda and southwest of Uganda. So it's a general problem, yet we think, as we'll be discussing, that there could be prospects for dealing away with that kind of problem.
7 out of...
And of course it is also worse with rural areas. The rural-based homesteads or households tend to have lesser food. Ironically, food is produced in the rural areas, but tend to have lesser food even at family level, so that they can't even have what is even sufficient later on for a child to take to school, to partake and take to school. So the peri-urban areas come next, but also the urban areas face a similar problem. The problem is more pronounced, more magnified in the rural areas than in the peri-urban and urban areas in Uganda.
Well, just for our viewer, 7 out of every 10, that is in primary, because we are looking at this research that was conducted in UPE schools, universal primary schools, that is 7 out of 10 go hungry in these schools. They don't have anything to eat while at school. So this is how grave this is, something, an offense to the rights of these kids, because food is a right. And how do you expect someone to study on an empty stomach? That is also something very challenging, and maybe explains later why we have some of these differences or variations in academic excellence or performances, urban vis-a-vis rural. But let's look at who is responsible to feed these children.
When you look at the Constitution of Uganda of 1995 as amended, when you look at the Children's Statute, when you look at the Education Act, that responsibility largely falls on the parents and guardians. In some of the cases, alas, the very guardians and parents don't have food even for home, later on spare for this child to go to school. So who is responsible? It is because on the government side has said, let me build classrooms, for instance, let me provide textbooks, let me provide other educational and instructional materials, let me put something in the laboratory, let me buy a football, football and many other balls that are required for extracurricular and co-curricular activities, and you, the parent, takes care of the uniform, takes care of the feeding. But in some of the cases, that has not happened, and that's what we are talking about. But we think that in respect to school feeding, there could be potentials that we could look at as well.
Even before we leave this, let's better understand, you know, in urban centers, someone would think, because people buy everything, it is either from the market, the supermarket, somewhere in pre-urban relatively. But when the research shows that it is worse in rural areas, Julius, let's be honest to ourselves. Would we term this as maybe laziness, people not appreciating the value of education? What could be the cause? Because Uganda is one of the countries in the world that has 2 seasons a year. We have soils, and we know people in the villages have land. Our forefathers will tell you what they used to take to school, packed something, you know, food that maybe they had the previous night. Why are we seeing this more of a problem in the rural areas?
It's a cocktail of issues, really. Yes, some parents and guardians have land, others don't. They are landless communities and homesteads in this country. Others are squatters. They are literally squatting the way you'd squat, and don't have permanent or occupancy of some of those pieces of land. Others is a number of factors. You also need to grow crops that are nutritious, have scientific application into your farming, and a number of homesteads in this country, a number of farmers, potential farmers, do not have access to an agricultural extensionist, to a veterinary extensionist, to a community development officer extensionist. So there are those limitations, some of them coming from the government deficit, but others also coming from the individual deficit, and others also being compounded by other factors.
Don't you think this
we live on church land? It is not our own land. We live on Kabaka's land in the case of Uganda. We live on Mwami Mutegaya's land. We are just squatting. So there are a number of factors that cause this, the kind of seedlings that we have at times in terms of control. And that's why you see like government is coming out more aggressively in this Sanja that the president has promised a number of things that we look forward to, have more extension workers, have mindset change and appreciation of the value of education to an individual and to the country at large and to the world. When you produce this family that produces a medical doctor, that produces an arts teacher, don't worry about the current discussion on arts and other science teachers and stuff, but produces an arts teacher, that family is likely to be better off than otherwise it would be had it not taken this child who now has grown into this teacher, arts or science or whichever that we are seeing today, this nursing assistant, this professional driver, professional mechanic, professional many other things. So that's where we are coming from on some of the issues, but we think that there is hope looking at maybe what government is unfolding during this Sanja.
Well, let's look at how fast we can achieve school feeding in this country, Uganda. Given the statistics that are really worrying, how fast can we expedite, ensure that children go to school, but they have something to eat so they can better even perform? Because an empty stomach, everyone knows it will be hard, even when big people have meetings. Yeah. One of the things on agenda, you see break tea, yes. Then later you see lunch tea. But these are people who came from
2 hours later.
Yeah, 2 hours later. Less. But these are people who came from families, sometimes here in the city, well-to-do families, they had every breakfast, but still that's something on the program. Then what happens to a poor child in a UPE school?
As Uganda Debt Network and many other actors, we have suggested to government, we have looked at government programs that are available, and we think that there could be an opportunity. We are thinking of a school gardening kind of system. We are also thinking of working with like cooperative or producer farmers groups to be able to supply to schools, and then they can get money through that arrangement. So in the case of, say, opening up school gardens, yourself and myself and many other Ugandans can testify that schools previously in the last decades also have had school gardens. Of course, some schools don't have land. Those that have land have been able to open up school gardens. The school gardens, rather than being used as a source of punishment, as a form of punishment, you have done this in class, we punish you by taking you to the garden, go and dig. And so you inculcate in us a culture that digging, touching a hoe or touching a walking tractor, you can only go there when you are condemned. Change that mindset. So in programs like Operation Wealth Creation, for instance, we had discussions with them in northern Uganda, in the districts of Nwoya, in the districts of Amur, Guru, and many others. And we said, based on the president's pledge of 17 million homes to Ugandan households, can you please look at schools as part of those households? So you look at the school as a household. So when you are giving out, say, farm implements in a community, the school becomes part of is considered as part of the household. So they received hose, Gwengidia Primary School, for instance, in the Amur areas. And so when we alerted them then and had that discussion, the Operation Wealth Creation officers didn't have a problem. They thought it was actually logical. We are wondering actually why it had taken so long. So then they received seedlings in some of the cases where seedlings were being distributed. So that already kickstarts you on opening up your school garden. The other bit has been through the Parents and Teachers Association. Say, I think this is pertinent to us. The children are ours. They are government's children, but they are also our children. We have the primary responsibility as parents. Let's contribute to this and be able to open up gardens by also having children to complement this opening up of the school gardens as part of agricultural learning, not as a punishment this time. That's one window. For the schools that have got land across the country. We've seen in Chibare, there have been initiatives of such a nature in Kayunga, in central Uganda, initiatives of that nature by parents being complemented by government. The So we would wish that that becomes scaled up across the country. The other bit is where, for instance, if you look through the National Development Plan, the Development Plan 3, if you looked at the NRM manifesto and what the president has promised the people of Uganda, or that social contract that we entered into when we voted the current government into power, just 2021. Don't talk about the 86 and others, but 2021. There are provisions for empowering Ugandan households. When you look at what the president has called, the president and government has called the parish development model, there are prospects for organizing farmers at parish level, at village level, into producer groups. So our thinking at the discussion we are having with Ministry of Education, for instance, is that, and Ministry of Trade, is that can we work with the district commercial officer who links up or verifies the producer groups in the communities, in these parishes. Those groups supply their produce to the adjacent schools, to the schools within those parishes, within those sub-counties, within those wards and town councils. So because we know that the farmer group A, Chana Mukaka Farmers Group,
supply to Chana Mukaka
yes,
Primary School.
Yes. Kaperebyong, this one, supplied cassava flour or supplied maize. Kamwenge, this one, supplied groundnuts to this school. Their money is worth so much. So government pays directly to that farmers group. Yes, yes. After all, the president has made a pledge on improving household income. So you achieve the president's pledge, the National Development Plan ambition, but also because children have food supplied at school, then they can be able to have a meal and improve the performance and results of universal primary education.
That I buy into.
When that works out, we can even scale it up to universal secondary education. That's where we are coming from, and we think that that is possible. That is one. The other bit is when you look at a government program like DINU, for instance. DIN is Development Initiatives for Northern Uganda. Because of the special programs, given the history, yes, the Konya and the wars that have happened, there have been some programs for affirmative action, for fast-tracking the regions that have had problems so that they can also come up quicker like many other parts of the country. So in NUSAF, Northern Uganda Social Action Fund, we've seen that before Cabinet is Northern Uganda Social Action Fund Phase 4. We think there is an opportunity for you to work with those producer groups that I've explained and a program of that nature to improve nutrition, to improve production and productivity, then to improve supplies to the schools, and then the children, the porters, the teachers are able to have a meal. It could even be one meal a day for starters. But as production increases, for instance, under the parish development model, once we hold our baby and we see it successfully implemented, there will be massive production. You will need market outlets. So one of the market outlets we've proposed to government is the schools. If you produce the milk, if you supplied milk to schools, this excess production we are seeing, for instance, in Western Uganda and in Central Uganda, would not happen.
Will not be there. Well, Julius, let me first remind our viewers that you can be part of that topic of discussion this morning by simply going on our social media platforms. That is on our WhatsApp group, on our WhatsApp number, which is on your screen, which is 0709 60 25 and 92, and you'll be able to have your say in this discussion. We are looking at achieving feeding in our schools, and a research done by Uganda This Network, where Julius is the program's director there, indicates that 7 out of every 10 children in universal primary education have nothing to eat while they're at school. Remember, these are primary children, and feeding means so much to them. How do you expect them to cram or think or understand or analyze what is being taught and grasp it, yet they are on empty stomachs. So this is a topic we are discussing this morning. How best can we ensure that these future Ugandans can have something to eat while at school? Julius, listening through, there is one area you didn't touch.
Yeah.
That is the responsibility of parents. I highly believe, yes, government is mandated in one way or the other.
Yeah.
When we talk about these cooperatives, producer groups, we talk about these NUSAFs, these are all government initiatives. When we talk about people growing food at home,
Yeah.
and because there is plenty, they sell to schools, and government is still the one to pay because it's going to purchase them foot the bill. Why is that bit of apparent? Because I want to believe, much as we look at poverty and research showing Karamoja, I want to believe still you as the parent, 90% or 99%, this child is your responsibility. Don't you feel we've demanded so much from government and we've in one way or the other paid a blind eye on personal responsibility?
As Uganda Debt Network and several other organizations, we have multi-pronged approaches to some of these advocacy issues that we talk about. The government side, yes, you committed to the Sustainable Development Goals, and so we can work with you that that is achieved. On the parents' side and guardians, we've had messages through different channels. We've had meetings at schools across selected places in the country and discussed with the parents and teachers through the parents and teachers associations on dealing away with the problem of no food for children at school. And so I think it is going to be different approaches for the same thing. It's like some of us say who support SC Villa as our team. You'll have player number 9 the other side. You'll have player number 3 here the other side. You'll have the goalkeeper the other side. All of us are pushing so that the enemy, in quotes, or the opponent does not score into our goalpost. So we are using different tactics. At times number 4, I should be here in the right wing, but I've already crossed midfield before you realize I'm scoring.
But I see in your explanation,
so using
you don't want to take the bull by its
using
own,
different tactics.
Because, for example, an issue of corruption,
yes.
I've seen Uganda Debt Network sometimes recommending laws as recommendations. Now when it comes to parents, see, I think you're kind of romancing the problem. I think it's better if maybe we propose laws taken on parents.
Our view is that the country is not short of laws. Our view is that you need consciousness, if I'm to use Karl Marx's word, consciousness, conscientization, that a parent sees or a guardian sees the value of education, sees and appreciates the value of feeding a child at home and at school. And that a number of parents are doing that, but some of them are encumbered. That's so we can use different approaches to be able precisely to achieve that. So the school gardens being one of them, also imparting a skill. You working with producer groups, which you are saying government pays because it has said it wants to increase household income as one of the approaches for consideration. But also the parent at home to produce food, to have capacity and potential to produce the food. So having that complementarity is able to get us to Babylon. Is it, I think, Babylon or Canaan for that matter, the promised land? That's precisely what we are talking. We are not absolving the parent. In fact, 90% of the responsibility lies with the parent. In some of the cases, the parent is encumbered. And I know that you've seen that across the country. We've seen people who have children on the streets. So which land are we talking about that they should be digging up? We've seen some other factors, alcoholism in some of the cases, where parents, guardians go to bars and to open places for Marwa and Ajono and Tonto and Kwete and many other things, and Buvera Waraj in the from the wee hours of the morning till the next dawn. So there are those attendant challenges, but that shouldn't make us lose focus of what we need to achieve. That is that you can achieve school feeding for improved performance of the children through UPE outcomes, say results, but also eventually better quality of human development.
A quick one before I go to the messages that are coming in. We've seen some schools come up with initiatives where parents contribute.
Yes.
Excuse me, where parents contribute monetary. What is your view on this? Of course, sometimes we've seen the head of state saying this makes universal primary education, then again have a money element, and maybe this would deter others. But I just want to get your opinion on this.
Our experience in Chibare, in Nacholi sub-region, in Gulu, in Lango, in Teso, in Karamoja, is that, let's take a hypothetical example, that through Parents Teachers Association, we have agreed to a 5,000 shillings termly per child. But that parents in some of those cases can do that in kind. That you can come on a Saturday, on a weekend, having worked on your garden, at least theoretically, you offer labor to this. So the money doesn't have to be in monetary terms all the time. We think, however, that government needs support. There has to be a complementarity role. In the same government, the government is not going to give you firewood, even if it gives you the food. Is not going to give you the water. Somebody has to fetch it. So the parent has to come in. If you can't, then please pay for somebody who does that. Otherwise, you come in kind, and you make sure that you split the firewood and is readily available at the school. Government needs to be supported rather than just simply be abandoned, certainly for you people.
Let's look at some of the messages. Good morning, I am Raymond from Kittigum. This program of achieving school feeding program still remains a big challenge because people sell even the little food they harvest. Strict rules need to be employed and community sensitization as well. Thank you. This clearly explains the poor performance in this region. Thank you, Raymond. More so when you talk about laws have to be enforced. Also another message coming in, it should be all about parents to really struggle hard to make sure their children do not starve. No matter the situation, the young children are the future of this country and can't reach that future without feeding them well. We didn't get your name, but thank you for your message as well. Good morning, UBC. The biggest problem include school administrators aren't good enough, lack of proper school inspections, high level of poverty is number 2 according to the message, by the parents, guardians, majority caused by the war impact, more so in Acholi sub-region. Then 3, corruption that has also hit education. Ige parents are tasked to buy reams of paper, but you get those taken to bookshops around and are being sold off. That is Jesafat Okumu. Thank you, Jesafat, there for the message. Good morning, UBC. I think government should widen the tax base such that more Ugandans pay tax. The government workers on practical policies for school. Ivan from Weyogerere. Thank you, Ivan, for that message. Happy morning. I'm asking if, according to Julius, whether peasants being referred to as farmers, this has been consistent government plan. Many initiatives to increase family income, but I'm always mesmerized by the results. Districts have agriculture offices, they stay in offices, yet implementation activities really are not being done. So he says, even if you have what you're calling for, maybe without follow-up, things will not move. Government cannot do everything. Feeding children is a principal role of parents. Stop laziness. Thank you for your program. That is Dennis from Hoima. And finally, good morning UBC and good morning Uganda. Why always private schools, institutions are left behind on such programs? Biamukama Eliasi from Isingiro. I think let's just end with those, but thank you so much for the messages that you've sent in. Really appreciate your feedback and your participation in our various segments of this show. Yes, Julius.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback, dear viewers. As it says in Isaiah come, let us reason together. So I thank the extent of contribution. In the case of Kagadi, the other bit will be, what have you done? Article 17 of Uganda's 1995 constitution, as amended, says it is the responsibility of the citizen. It talks about the duties of the citizen, including paying your taxes and following the money, amongst many other things, including fighting corruption, including responsible parenthood. So precisely, feeding your family is your cardinal role. It is not a role of the head of state. It is not the role of the chief administrative officer. It is not the role of a parish chief, primarily. So if they are lazy and they're in office and you are aware, have you reported them? Please do. This is a protracted struggle. It is not of one person. Private schools are not left behind. We, for instance, suggested to government, and we will continue to before Parliament and many others. Let me just take a quick example. If we are to just provide one meal for 10.7 million children under universal primary education, you would need about 10.7 million, assuming a 1,000 shillings. But also there are about 4.3 million pupils in private schools. So that takes you to about 15 million children in Uganda, and that you'd need precisely about 15 million also for that to happen, or 15 billion for that to happen. And that is attainable. Also remembering that if, for instance, through the farmers groups, they are peasant now, but the government is making effort through the parish development model that they become active producers. With government coming in to give a hand of purchase, those will become the bigger cash cows and the bigger producers at a future date. So once you support children with through that kind of arrangement of farmers groups who already are going to be organized by government through other forums, you just provide a linkage. You are also injecting money in the otherwise poor families to become richer. You are expanding your capacity.
So it's a trickle-down effect.
You are producing your capacity for attracting taxes.
Julius, in the interest of time, just in a minute, let me have your final remarks regarding achieving school feeding in Ugandan schools.
I think from the perspective of, say, National Children's Authority, Ministry of Education, Uganda Debt Network, Save the Children, and some of us, there are prospects for this to be achieved without injecting so much, but by just tapping into the existing government programs so that we are able to deliver the human capital development requirements of this country. Thank you. Well,
I want to thank you. That is Julius Kapwepwe, who happens to be the Director of Programs, Uganda Debt Network, for first and foremost for the research, because what research does is give statistics and this call for action, and also the suggestions he has talked about. I still call upon parents. Let's have children by choice, not by chance, and let's perform our cardinal role. Government can do so much, but the onus is entirely on us. Have a lovely day. I'll leave you with Ruben, who'll be taking you through the sports updates and all the interesting games. God bless you, and go for your jab. We need to be vaccinated to enjoy Uganda to the fullest. Good morning.
Brought to you by
GoTV Valley. For just 25,000 shillings, enjoy the world's biggest leagues and cap competitions. GoTV.